welcome back, and as you can see, I'm at a little different venue. The Reno Academy of Combat has graciously allowed me to do an interview here at their facility. It's a great facility, and we're going to talk a little MMA, and I'm joined by a local Reno radio guy, Greg DeLong, and he's going to break down the 3 big events that we got coming up. We got 2 of the events, one UFC, one Strikeforce, and we got the Reno Academy of Combat has their own event coming up on Friday, and we're going to go ahead and break that one down first.
Yeah, Ultimate Reno Combat, Friday, March 4th over at the Grand Sierra Resort. One of the big things is Ultimate Reno Combat will be giving its first female title, the middleweight title, which is 145 pounds for females. Tace Stafford from here in Reno. She was voted the #1 amateur female in her weight class in 2010. Is fighting an undefeated Amanda Bell. So it should be a great title fight. And there's 11 or 12 other fights on the card, all amateur, and it's always a great show for 2 or 3 hours, usually less than 3 hours. Doors open at 7, fights start at 8. You can still get tickets at GrandSierraResort.com or at the Blood Happening store inside here at the Reno Academy of Combat. And come on down for a great night of fights. I get fortunate, I'm the MC, so I'm in the cage for, I don't get hit. I always tell people I walk into the cage more than anybody that night and not a scratch on me.
What's a little, what could someone expect that's a little different from the amateur ranks to that of the mainstream?
2 of the biggest things, I guess say 3. The rounds are 3 3-minute rounds, and the title fight will be 5 3-minute rounds. Whereas at the professional level, they're 5-minute rounds. Second thing is no elbow strikes are allowed to the head in any position. You can still knee to the head when you're standing. You can elbow to the body. And the other thing is the referees tend to be a little bit quicker in stopping a fight. These are amateurs. They need to learn their experience in the cage, and this is not a place where they get it. Whereas a professional may be given more time to recover, which we've seen happen in pro fights where all of a sudden somebody comes back, i.e. Frankie Edgar versus Gray Maynard. You know, if that would have been an amateur fight, it would have been stopped long before that. But again, those guys have earned their stripes. They're pros. They're getting paid for it. They know what they're getting into with the amateurs. Some of the guys, you know, they may fight one time and maybe that's it. They wanted to give it a try. Other guys want to use it as a stepping stone to get to a professional career. So that's the biggest difference. Otherwise, the guys go in there, the cage is the same. Actually, one of the referees, Kim Winslow, has refereed in the UFC and Strikeforce. She's been televised, so everything's it's sanctioned by the Nevada Athletic Commission. So it's as good as you can get. And it's a great chance to support local fighters. Fighters come over from California and everything. So great event. It supports the local fighters and gives them an avenue to develop without having to travel too far away. They get to have the home court advantage per se and let the other fighters travel.
Yeah, that's always a plus. All right, moving on, looks like we'll go to UFC, and they're having their 3rd event on the Versus Network.
Yeah, UFC Live on Versus 3, Louisville, Kentucky. Martin Kamen, Diego Sanchez main event. Great fight, tough fight, until I heard Diego Sanchez on a conference call this week with the UFC where Diego talked about some changes he made in his life, admitted mistakes he had made, that he was totally devastated with the loss to BJ Penn, that he did not take Hathaway serious, that he would actually train and then go drinking, and he goes, he was just doing things wrong, and he totally turned that around, moved back to New Mexico, trains back at Greg Jackson's camp, which is one of the best camps in the world, and lives up in the mountains. He says now, no cable television, anything. A motivated Diego Sanchez is, as they said, a nightmare. He doesn't want to use that nickname anymore because he says a nightmare has bad connotations. But I'm going to take Diego Sanchez in that over Mark Kamen. Tough fight. But a motivated Diego is a very, very tough fighter to beat.
Yeah, I see that one very tough because Kamen had the very close match with
Jake Shields. Had a very tough fight with Jake Shields. He also got knocked out by Paul Diaz. I mean, Kamen's a tough dude. I mean, and both Kamen and Diego Sanchez took out Paulo Thiago. And in both times, I favored Paulo Thiago, and I was surprised by both of them.
And there's like another fight on the card is CB Dalloway and Mark Munoz.
CB Dalloway and Mark Munoz is 2 wrestlers that are MMA guys. CB Dalloway, All-American in Arizona State, high school state champ in my home state of Ohio. Mark Munoz, an NCAA champ at Oklahoma State University, wrestling for John Smith, who's probably the greatest wrestler the U.S. has produced as far as his credentials. I think Mark Munoz has the stand-ups a little bit better, and I think the wrestling cancels each other out. And I'm going to take Munoz to win a close, tough, razor-thin decision. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go the other way. But I'm taking Munoz because I'm seeing this fight staying on his feet for 3 rounds. Unless somebody gets knocked out, and then the fighter. I see it's going to be a waste of energy, I think, for either of them to try to take the other one down because of their wrestling credentials.
I kind of see that a little bit similar. And I'm not really sure quite how Dalloway's stands. Like I know that Munoz has suffered some big time stand-up losses.
The big time he caught that kick from Matt Hamill, and that was when he was new to MMA, and he was also at 205 pounds, not 185 pounds. So Mark Munoz has addressed those, and he's worked quite a bit on his hands. And like I said, I'm taking Munoz.
Another one is like Brian Bowles.
Brian Bowles coming back injured, lost his title to Dominic Cruz in Ohio. Yes, so maybe it only has been a year in Ohio. Lost it to Dominic Cruz in Ohio and broke his hand, and then he was scheduled to come back. Injuries, some other things have gone on, and now he's finally making his debut in the UFC.
Yeah.
These WEC guys that are moving in now, it's different for the 155 pounders that came from the WEC to the UFC because they were fighting when they had an option, per se, to go to the UFC. The 135 and 145 pounders did not have the option to go to the UFC. They didn't have a weight class. So they are basically fighting the same guys they would have been fighting if this was a WEC card. It just so happens that it's not under the UFC banner. But fans get a chance to see Brian Bowles, a former champion with one defeat. So.
And there's one last one from the UFC versus Joe Stevenson.
Joe Daddy Stevenson, yeah, tough one. Coming off 2 losses. Same thing with Joe Daddy. He's moved around a little bit, tried to change things up in his life. Losing 3 in a row in the UFC in the 155-pound weight class, the most loaded weight class right now, because those fighters did come over from the WEC and it was already a stacked weight class. The 155-pound class is one place right now where you don't want to have multiple losses and you don't want to have a bad performance. Could he stick around after a loss? If it's a 3-round war, if the fans are on their feet, if it's a back-and-forth tussle and he loses a tough fight or a close fight, yeah, he could stick around. If he doesn't look good and he loses the 3rd in a row, Joe Stevenson could be done in the UFC.
All right, I think that'll pretty much wrap up the discussion on UFC on Versus, and now we'll shift over to the final event of the weekend, Strikeforce, and obviously the big fight there is Faye Zhao and Dan Henderson for the title.
Yeah, and Dan Henderson held 2 titles in Pride, the only man to hold their what they call their middleweight, which was what's called light heavyweight, and I believe the welterweight, which is the middleweight.
Okay.
And they went by kilos, so one was like a 204 point something, and the other one was 183. And Dan Henderson held them both at the same time. Pride dissolved. Henderson came over to the UFC. He's fought for the 185, the 205 pound title in the UFC, both losses. Anderson Silva and Quentin Jackson. And then he lost to Jake Shields, we saw, which was a surprise to a lot of people, including myself. And he gassed. And one of the things is he always said he does not like going down 185. He's fighting at 205. Dan Henderson has power. King Mo was dominating Faye Zhao until he got caught. He was dominating with his wrestling. Dan Henderson's got the wrestling, but he's also not afraid to stand and bang. So I don't see Henderson being afraid to stand and bang. And knocking out Dan Henderson is a very tough thing to do. So I'm looking for Dan Henderson to pull this out and finally get a belt in his 4th try here in a U.S.-based promotion. Finally get a belt.
Hopefully, it's like I'm an Henderson guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And one other one we'll touch on here, Tim Kennedy.
Tim Kennedy and Melvin Manhoff. Tough fight. Melvin Manhoff is a striker, K1 level fighter as far as the striking goes. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. Lost to Robbie Lawler when he got knocked out when he was crushing it. I don't know if Robbie Lawler could have come out of the chair. If it would have gone to the end of the 1st round, I don't know if Robbie Lawler would have been able to walk back to the center of the cage. And he gets knocked out. And that's what happens when you're a striker. There's that potential. And then he gets submitted over in Japan, and he just looks horrible on the ground. He's talked about the fact that he's only going to do MMA this year. He doesn't have to worry about his K1 stuff, so he's going to concentrate on the ground. You don't get that good on the ground that fast. So I take a look at Tim Kennedy to take this fight to the ground, which is Manhoff's kryptonite, and submit him.
And one other one that kind of could future names in the sport is Billy Evangelista and George Masvidal.
That's a fight right now at 155 pounds. If they gave Fight of the Night bonuses like they do in the UFC, UFC. That could be a fight of the night. There's going to be fireworks going off on that. I don't know who to pick right now. I'm going to wait till later in the week. I got to study it a little bit more. But it's basically going to be a coin flip, because as soon as I pick one of them, it's going to be like, well, I should have gone the other way. But don't forget, there's also a female title fight on that card. Mercedes Conan is was scheduled to fight Misha Tate, the #1 contender, who won a tournament for that, who just had to pull out due to a knee injury, but they had in the backup, I believe her first name is Joe Camachi, who is undefeated, is stepping in and taking Misha Tate's place. So part of the co-main event, along with Dan Henderson and Fajon Cavalcante, is going to be a female title fight. Again, as we were talking, Ultimate Reno Combat has females fighting. That's one thing the UFC doesn't have. And female fights, if you've never seen one, a lot of times they end up being, if not the fight of the night, close to it. Because a lot of them fight with a chip on their shoulder, like, hey, I got something I have to prove because people don't think I belong here. And they go in there and they throw down.
Yeah, that seems to be Strikeforce's niche.
Yeah, actually it is. It is.
Women. All right. It's like I wanted to thank Greg for joining me, and it's like, and again I want to thank Reno Academy of Combat for letting me host this interview. And stick around, and we'll be right back.